So a couple of days ago, I was sitting there thinking about how I'm going to share this idea with you that I call career resonance. And my 9-year-old daughter came up and interrupted me, as kids are prone to do. And she said, "Dad, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Of course." And she said to me, "I'm having a problem with one of my friends." And I said, "Honey, what's the problem?" And she said, "I feel like I can't be myself. I feel like when I'm with her, I have to pretend to be somebody else and do the things she wants to do." So I said to my daughter, "Honey, who you are inside is perfect. You're just terrific, just the way you are." And she stops me and says, Dad, I know that." But then she says, "I'm afraid that the person she's friends with is the person I've been pretending to be." And that's really what we're talking about. You see, we have a core inside of who we really are that resonates with us here. And then we interact with the world. Now, sometimes we find environments where we can resonate with the world and be who we are. But often, when we encounter the world, we feel like who we are just isn't good enough. And we're tempted to create an outer shell, a false self of who we have to be. Now, this happens in many places, excuse me, but the place where I see this most is in the world of careers, of what people do for a living. Now, I've worked with executives all over the world, but I've also worked with a lot of MBA students. And if any of you know an MBA student, they are masters at figuring out who they have to be. When they target a company, there are websites, there are books that tell you how to prepare and how to practice and how to be exactly what the company needs. And what I learned is, for some of them, maybe it is what they want. But for a lot of them, they're out here. And the problem is, when you sell a company, this person out here, you still have to go to work every day. And there's a major disconnect. Now, in the corporate world, I used to go into some phenomenal organizations and meet with the senior-most people and ask them the question, what does it take to succeed? How do people grow and get to the next level? And we would take that apart and we'd write assessments and we'd measure and we'd teach. And I'd meet with people and say, this is what it takes. Now, for some of them, they were there, it was who they were. I was just another level, right? But for a lot of them, I discovered that I was working out here. And here's the problem. The size of the disconnect between who somebody really is and who they're being every day is directly proportional to the amount of pain they feel. Now, I worked in organizations where you could make a tremendous amount of money by faking it. But no matter how much money you pour on that disconnect, you still feel it. Now, these organizations were the kind of places where people made themselves nuts trying to figure out how they were supposed to look. One of my clients had an article written in a business publication about a young man who was looking for a job there. And he was asking that question, what should I wear? And he asked the question, how many eyelets should I have in my shoes? Sounds crazy, but he said, I've heard about a guy that didn't get a job because he had too few. Now, there's a backstory for this. At the time, 2- and 3-eyelet shoes were considered fashion, and new people were supposed to have traditional shoes because fashion shoes were for partners and basic lace-ups were for new people in the firm. Now, I knew this client really well. There was no eyelet policy, all right? But people struggled to figure out how to look and sound and walk and talk, and they did care about this abstract thing called presence. But then I learned it doesn't have to be that way. One day I was sent to see one of the legends of the firm, someone who was credited with taking it from a domestic shop to a global powerhouse. He ran the place for 15 years, and he was now in semi-retirement. And I walk into his office, and I look down, and his shoes are scuffed up. And his suit is rumpled. And I'm thinking, how can this be? Then he opens his mouth and starts to talk about his business and his company and how much he loves it and how much he loves serving clients. And it hits me like a ton of bricks. This man is a natural. He found the spot where who he is exactly what's needed. And there's something about the naturals. I'm going to read you something from this man's New York Times obituary. He died a number of years back. Like all obituaries, it goes on to describe his philanthropy, how he built companies, his role in the community, and it also says his style, like his disposition, was unadorned. He kept his hair closely cropped and wore off-the-rack suits and socks that hung a bit too low. New York Times, global guy, pillar of the community, saggy socks. So what you can learn from the naturals is they are who they are wherever they go. Powerful concept. Now, at the end of the day, okay, it's easy to say it's okay for this guy to be a natural. You know, he's someone who runs a big company, right? He's got the power, but you can do it too. And this is when I talk to people about how you can emerge as a natural. It's when they cut me off and say, yeah, but companies don't want that. It's too easy to blame corporate America. There are dynamic, creative companies that are trying to bring out the power of the individual. I served one such company, a global consulting firm, that influenced governments, that influenced global companies, and they knew they couldn't all be the same. They knew they had to bring out the individual. So they created a criterion for partnership election that they called distinctiveness. You want to be a partner? You got to figure out who you are, what you're great at, what you love to do, and how to bring it to bear in a distinctive manner for our clients and for our firm. Fabulous concept. I coached hundreds of people on the rise there, and so many of them said, all right, Jeff, this distinctiveness thing, how do I do that? How do I make them perceive me as distinctive? And it became a box to check. The door was wide open. But we're the ones who will adjust and say, no, I can't be who I am. I need to be who I think they need me to be. Now, this gets set up early. The developmental psychologist, Erik Erikson, wrote a while ago about how we learn to become who we really are. And Erikson focused on adolescence as a time where you're not supposed to know, you're supposed to figure things out. And if any of you have teenagers, this is kind of an I heard a laugh, this is kind of an interesting time. So my son Colin comes walking out of his room with bright blue hair, which is always interesting the first time you encounter it. He's got a black t-shirt on, black pants, studded leather bracelets, and he wants to be a rock and roller. It's okay. 2 days later, same hair. Camouflage pants, camouflage t-shirt, he wants to be in the military. What Erikson said is you're supposed to not know. You're supposed to mix up different things and try them. You reach a point in your life where you start to figure out, wow, I can't have this and this at the same time. You go through an anxiety period, some crisis, and you say, I'll take this, and I know I've left this behind. But that doesn't always happen. Now, when I was about 12 or 13, I loved cars. I mean, I loved cars, and I still do. Last night, my son and I were looking at the classifieds, trying to figure out what his next car would be, what his dream car would be. Now, he's only 13, so my wife wasn't happy about this. But I loved cars, and I didn't have a car at 13, but I had this go-kart, which I'd taken apart and put together and painted, and I loved it. So I'm with my father, and we're talking to this guy who's some prestigious doctor, and the doctor says to me, so, son, what do you want to be when you grow up? I told him the truth. I have no idea. But I really love driving my go-kart. I think I'm going to race go-karts and one day become a professional race car driver. Then out of the corner of my eye, I got the look. Now, we all have our own version of the look. My version of the look was, stop. Whatever you're doing is not okay. So I stopped and I hit the brakes and I changed gears and I said, or I'll be a doctor. I've always been interested in medicine. Then everything is okay, and everything calms down. You see, what Erikson taught us is in order to find who we are, We need to have a period of not knowing that's sanctioned by society. So he called this moratorium. Yeah, go figure it out. But we don't have that anymore. How many of you wrote, this is where I'm going to be in 5 years on a college application? All right? Kids today are thinking, how do I position myself for college, for my career? So without a moratorium, we do something called foreclosing. We grab an identity that sounds right for 2 reasons. One is it reduces our anxiety because not knowing is hard. The second reason is it reduces the anxiety of those around us who want us to be something and need us to be able to say this is who we are. But figuring out who you are and how you're natural is doable, it's possible. I help people do it every day. But it requires some deep digging, some looking within. Now, I'm going to give you folks a proxy for that deep digging, because when I do it with someone, it takes a while. But here's the best proxy I know. Think about a time where you were at work or doing some work, and you did something totally insignificant. And people around you said, my God, that's incredible. How did you do that? How did you know to say that? And you say, nah, it's nothing. No big deal. It is a big deal. It's a really big deal. You see, the speed with which people dismiss what they do naturally and easily, and the power of the impact that it can have, the speed they dismiss it is staggering. And here's why. For a long time, I thought it was about self-esteem. Now, as a psychologist, we look for things like that. But it's not self-esteem. It's much easier than that. It's that it comes easily. And people can't believe this little thing I just did. People think it's so amazing because it was so easy for me, and it should be easy. So when you find those things that you do naturally, they should seem like they're easy. Now, when we find those things, it's really important that we can frame them. So what I tell people to do is when you think of this event or when we interview you together, give me those natural things you do in really simple terms that your 8-year-old can understand. Not, I was working on the quarterly numbers when I thought, no, simple. And I'll give you an example. There was a guy who I knew who loved technology, loved computers, loved fixing things, okay? And I said to him, what's this about? And he said, at heart, I'm geeky. That's not a business term. And then he talked to me about how he loved fixing things. So he's a fixer. By the way, this can take an hour because it starts with, I was in this company and as I built it, there were these problems. No, you're a fixer. And then he loved entrepreneurship and risk, okay? So what he said is, we said he's an entrepreneur, and we also said he likes risk. So we have this list, and when you do it with a deep dive, the list is much, much longer. So I say to people, give this list a name. Call it banana. And they look at me like I'm insane. Banana, I'm a professional person. Why would I call it banana? I say, here's why. You see this list? In your mind, are you thinking about what this qualifies you for? Where in a job description it fits? Are you looking at that in your head? Probably. So we need to divorce ourselves from job title when we're looking at what we do naturally. Because we work in jobs. We work in companies, but we work for and with people. And what we do naturally has to resonate. I love cars, you hear it, you feel it, right? It's still there, but I could be a doctor, right? I fit the job description. No, you're a banana. Where do people who banana hang out, right? Where is this banana-ness exactly what's needed? So you have to explore. Now, the first thing is you need to give yourself that moratorium. You have to let yourself not know. So you need a timeline. Now, it's not societal permission anymore. You can't walk into the cocktail party and when someone says, so what do? You say, I don't know, I'm figuring it out, and maybe I'll race go-karts, right? That doesn't work. You come up with this moratorium yourself. There are some natural ways to do it. It could be the length of a severance package. It could be how much longer you can take it in the job that you're in. And then you find domains where you can explore. So for this guy, he looked in some big companies because he could fix things, but over time, he didn't click with the people there. He looked in consulting firms because they fix things, and no offense to any consultants, but sometimes they're good at some pretty geeky stuff. But he didn't click. But he looked at a bunch of oddball companies, and most of them crashed and burned, but one of them, he really hit it. And here's what happened. The CEO said to him, you're phenomenal, you're great, I love you. I have no idea what to do with you. And what the guy said was, put me where you feel the most pain. Throw me at your biggest problems, we'll figure it out along the way. So first he worked there temporarily. Then he became an employee, now he helps run the company. It's possible. It's really possible. So I'm going to leave you with two thoughts. If you're the kind of person who's found that sweet spot where who you are and what you love to do resonates with your work, think about how you got there and share with others that it's possible. But if you're not, ask yourself the following question. Am I willing to tolerate the anxiety of not knowing? Am I willing to find what I do naturally and look? Because if you find that place where who you are naturally and what you can't help but doing is exactly what's needed, you can achieve the success you want and make the money you want by being yourself, because that's the thing that only you can do. Thank you very much.